Today is August 27th. It's the 240th day of the year, and this is the On This Day podcast. On this day in 1859, oil is discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania. The well that begins producing on this day is the first commercially successful oil well and sets off the commercial oil boom in the United States and around the world. The well struck on this day by Edwin Drake is not the first to pull oil from the ground. Oil production has been slowly developing in Europe and Canada and the middle section of Asia over the last decade, but it's Drake's approach that is different. Oil production in the U.S. to date has been a result of trenches dug in the ground or as a byproduct of drilled salt wells. Drake takes a different tack. He decides to drill specifically for oil, using a drill bit powered by a steam engine that he acquires in Erie, Pennsylvania. He begins drilling on an island in the middle of Oil Creek near Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1858. And everyone in Titusville thinks he's crazy. The drill bores 16 feet down into the ground before water seeps into the hole and the walls of the shaft begin to collapse. And all those people who thought he was crazy, they're sure of it now. But Drake contemplates this problem and devises the solution of a drive pipe, using the pipe that will carry the oil up to the surface in the drilling process to prevent the hole from collapsing. He lowers the 10-foot segments of pipe into the hole and then lowers his drill into the pipe and continues drilling down 20 feet, 30 feet, 50 feet. On this day in 1859, Drake's drill breaks through a crevice at a depth of 69.5 feet. And then he and his drilling team, they call it a day and head for home. They don't realize that they have just struck oil on this day. Only when they return the next morning and look down into the pipe to start drilling again do they see that oil is rising up in the pipe. They pump the oil out of the ground and into a bathtub, and the bathtub soon proves to be too small. Edwin Drake's discovery of oil on this day in 1859 sets off an oil rush in western Pennsylvania, with every commercial interest rushing to buy up neighboring plots of land. Real estate prices skyrocket. Oil rigs fill the landscape, and within just a few years, 8 oil refineries are built in northwestern Pennsylvania. Drake's discovery is considered to be the first large-scale commercial extraction of oil. However, Edwin Drake has only secured a small plot of land, and soon after striking oil on this day in 1859, he is priced out of the real estate market and can only watch as the modern oil industry is born out of the ground around him. Edwin Drake does make a sizable amount of money from his oil well, but he loses it all on Wall Street, and he never patents his drilling method that becomes the industry standard drilling process. In his later years, Drake is broke and destitute. But he lives his final years in modest comfort after the Pennsylvania legislature votes to give him an annuity of $1,500. An annuity for that crazy Edwin Drake, whose tenacity in the face of adversity and ridicule gives birth to the modern oil industry when he strikes oil on this day in 1859. Born on this day in 1896, Russian inventor, engineer, and physicist Leon Theremin. Theremin is most famous for the musical instrument he invents that bears his name, the theremin. Theremin is born Lev Sergeyevich Theremin in St. Petersburg, Russia. In 1920, Theremin is doing research work on proximity sensors for the Soviet government. In the process of his work, he invents a musical instrument unlike any other musical instrument, one of the first electronic instruments ever made. It's a box with 2 antennae attached to it, one that sticks straight up in the air, and the other a looped antenna that sticks out to the side. By moving his hands in the air in proximity to the antenna, closer to and further away from the antenna, he produces dynamic melodies from a sine wave. One antenna controls the pitch of the note being played, and the other antenna controls the volume of the tone. The closer the hand is to the pitch antenna, the higher the note, and the farther away the other hand is from the volume antenna, the louder the note is that's being played. Theremin begins performing classical music with his device. Around this same time, he develops a television system using a rotating mirror. The mechanical television does not catch on, but the concept he devises of interlacing does catch on and is still used in televisions to this day. In the late 1920s, Theremin embarks on a tour of Europe and performs with his musical box for curious audiences throughout the continent. He moves to the United States and performs with the New York Philharmonic in 1927. And in 1928, he obtains a patent for his invention for the Theremin method of an apparatus for the generation of sounds, in the process adopting the westernized name of Leon Theremin. He sells production rights for the Theremin to RCA, but despite the curiosity about this odd instrument, the Theremin does not prove to be a popular seller. Nonetheless, it's adopted by a few classical musicians who perform with it in concert halls all across the U.S. Artists such as Clara Rockmore and Lucy Rosen. The Theremin will also be used by classical composers writing for cinema. It's first heard in films such as Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound and Billy Wilder's The Lost Weekend, both released in 1945. In the 1951 film The Day the Earth Stood Still, Bernard Herrmann uses the Theremin in his score for the sci-fi film, establishing the Theremin as the go-to spooky, eerie sound to connote aliens, horror, and things that are otherworldly. While in the U.S., Theremin invents a variety of other instruments, such as the Theremin cello, and the rhythmicon, which is a sort of early drum machine with which a player can create rhythms and melodies, and a terpsitone, which is a platform with space-controlling antenna attached to it, that, like the Theremin, converts a dancer's movements into music. It's sort of an early version of the Wii. In 1938, Theremin leaves the U.S. and returns to the Soviet Union. By some accounts, he's forcibly taken out of the country by the NKVD, the Soviet precursor to the KGB, which is the precursor to the FSB, today's Russian Federal Security Service. In 1938, the NKVD allegedly take Theremin from New York back to the USSR, or he leaves on his own accord because of tax problems in the U.S. Whatever the case, once back in the USSR, he ends up in a prison camp in Siberia. While locked away in a secret prison camp laboratory, he continues to invent. But instead of musical devices and televisions, he makes communication devices of a different kind that are used by the NKVD in their covert battles with the United States. Among his inventions is the Buran eavesdropping system, an early laser microphone that detects sound waves in glass windows with an infrared beam. You can aim the beam at a window across the street and hear what's being said inside the room on the other side of the glass. Theremin invents this in the mid-1940s. He also creates the Thing. In 1945, the Soviets give the U.S. ambassador to Moscow a gift, a large wooden replica of the Great Seal of the United States, presented to the ambassador as a gesture of friendship by the Young Pioneers, the Soviet version of the Boy and Girl Scouts. The ambassador hangs the Great Seal in his office at the ambassador's residence in Moscow, and it hangs there for 7 years before the tiny listening device embedded inside the wooden carving is discovered. The listening device is a small membrane and antenna that is powered on remotely when a radio signal on a specific frequency is transmitted to the device from a transmitter and receiver in a car parked across the street. The Thing, made by Leon Theremin, is discovered by the British when they accidentally tune in to the specific frequency and hear American voices on their radio. The Thing is analyzed by the British and reverse-engineered for use by the Brits, Americans, and other Western nations. The Thing is essentially the passive technology used today in RFID tags, those tags that are attached for inventory tracking purposes to a whole host of products that we buy in stores on a daily basis. In many ways, Leon Theremin, born on this day in 1896, invents the 21st century. He passes away in Moscow in 1993 at the age of 97. There are 126 days left in the year. On This Day is produced by me, Dave Schultz. Thank you very much for listening.